Yeah, we have to make sure we all sit in the right places, otherwise it confuses everybody. But I think we're there. That's great. And I'll sit on the end here. I should start this off with, the title. I mean, it's designed, obviously, to be a little bit, just grab you and say, okay, so where is the money going? And I think this has come about from there being sort of a set of comments in the industry about what is happening with SMS. There's been sort of some drops in business being observed by various organizations. There's a huge dependency, particularly on two-factor authentication, on the use of SMS as a channel. And when we look at it as an industry as a whole, it is generating a huge amount of the revenue associated. These two-factor authentications in an SMS environment are generating a huge amount of the revenue that we're all dependent upon. So that's why the question, where's this money going? And what I'd really like to say is not where it's going, but where it's going. Because I think one of the things about this is it's natural in any marketplace. You are seeing a rate of change, you are seeing things developing, which changed I'll use that word again, the environment. It changed the choices that you make about what are the technical tools that you're going to use. So that's kind of where we came from in thinking about this particular session. Afraid I'm going to have to refer to my notes, because after the celebrations of last night, my brain is not at its best, in its best condition, but let me do my best to kind of go into this. So I should first of all give a quick introduction to my own company, and then we'll do so for everyone else here. But almost the qualification for why we should even talk about this subject. One of our real prime businesses is looking after the real-time routing of messaging, the validation. We're providing that routing and validation of these messages to really the entire ecosystem. And to give an example, it's probably about 50 billion requests, 50 billion transactions that went through our system in the last year, that have been routed, that have been validated, that have provided that information to assist. And really answering the question, here's a number, which operator should I send it to? It's as simple as that. There's not a great deal more complexity to it. And doing that very, very quickly. So with such a huge chunk, such a huge amount of those transactions, those requests for information being driven by one-time codes, one-time passwords, two-factor authentication, whatever is the phrase that you want to use, and us then answering that question, is it a valid request? Does it actually make sense? And who should I send to? And to make sure that it's going to be delivered. So that's kind of where we sit in this particular set of questions. I'd also say, a little bit further to my introduction, if you're a regular follower of the MEF, you'll know we use Mobile Squared a great deal. Nick Lane provides a lot of sort of research and looks into the trends and the analysis of what is going on in the industry. And there's a couple of predictions which he has talked about a lot during this week in the sessions we've had Sunday and yesterday. Actually, we agreed last night that this particular individual, Nick Lane, we should have a jar in the middle here, and every time we mention his name, we should put another coin in it, because he gets so many mentions all the time. But he does a tremendous job, I think, for a number of us within this industry. And it kind of comes into, with the two-factor authentication making so much of this SMS traffic, there's two big observations that he's been pulling out of it. One is price. With the increase in the termination rates that the mobile operators have imposed, it is creating a different environment. We're seeing a new price point. The US may be one of the most competitive marketplaces where you're looking at a cent, something like that for terminating a message. But we've now got markets where 20 to 30 cents are becoming typical. And that is completely changing that marketplace. One thing that Nick observed, I think yesterday, was that when you look at some of these increases in the termination rates, kind of taking advantage of business messaging, taking advantage of this driver of two-factor authentication, those businesses have lost about $100 million of revenue as a result of what could be considered as overpricing. Be interesting to see whether people think that has actually moved to other places. But anyway, that's a great opportunity to discuss that now. The second great observation he makes is that this increase in price attracts fraud. It is creating an opportunity for people to use an environment where transaction prices have gone from 1 cent to 20 cents. That really does attract that whole idea that, oh, I can make some money out of that. If I can find a way of playing the game to generate those 20 cents a message, what can I do? How creative can I be with these things? So these are probably, two of the key factors which I think are being quoted as influencing this two-factor authentication marketplace. There's varying statements about how much of the SMS marketplace actually is 2FA, and again, I'll get some comments on that. I've seen as much as 80% being quoted. I think one of the large aggregators yesterday, I think Cinch was talking about this being sort of probably, actually I think you had the numbers sort of in the sort of 20 to 30% range. So it's anywhere probably between 15% and 80% of the message volume could be this two-factor authentication business, which is a very simple application for the SMS space. So, costs and fraud are having a very direct impact. And I've even had the quote from one company, it has caused this business to drop off a cliff. And that's a statement I'd like to test. Is that actually true? I could give you one thing from us. I mean, we see messaging or requests for messages to be sent. It hasn't dropped off a cliff. So has it moved? Is it something different? What's the change there? But it's very, very interesting to take that observation that a piece of business is maybe moving away from some of the traditional providers. So okay, I've made a few observations, and I just wanted to kind of set a scene and maybe sow some seeds of some of the thoughts around this. But what I'd really like to do now is sort of introduce the panel. And basically, I want them to critique what I've just said. I want them to give me a hard time and say, no, you've got it all wrong, or no, it's like this, or it's like that. And I hope that you'll find that a sort of interesting debate. But just to start off, let's start by sort of going through and getting an introduction. I'm afraid my manners require me to ask Luisa to start that and say, could you just possibly talk about your role and kind of how Identidad works within that space and sort of the impacts that you're seeing? Just a few general comments about this whole SMS and two-factor authentication world.
Thanks, Tim. Yes.
I'll take a seat as well.
Yes, you should.
Well, I'm Luisa Sanchez, and I work as the Vice President for the Messaging Division in Identidad Technologies. We're a company that has over 23 years in the international telecommunications industry. 10 years ago, we started into A2P. Today, we're a technology company. We provide communication solutions to organizations worldwide, ranging from CPaaS, anti-fraud. We monetize right now 24 different markets in Latin America and the Caribbean. We act as the exclusive aggregator for the operator. So basically, our role within the validation and OTP, SMS, is being an aggregator, managing, these markets, monetizing that correctly. We implement anti-fraud solutions, and we work with brands and with enterprise to terminate this traffic, not only in these 24 markets, but worldwide.
So you have real visibility from a very practical point of view.
Absolutely.
This is your business.
On a minute-to-minute basis, we basically see that, yes.
So let's come back and then we'll question some of these questions. But maybe, Andrew, I could ask you next to comment on the role that your company plays in this space.
Yes, so I should qualify myself. I was the founder and CEO and chairman of mBlocks, which at a certain point was the world's largest A2P provider. So I remember the birth of SMS OTP for 2FA back in about 2004 with Lycos. And I remember the first major SMS OTP fraud that was perpetrated against Transport for London in about 2005. So this is not a new problem. Today, I have a completely different role. I'm the founder and CEO of iProov, iProov. We're the world's leading provider of cloud-based facial verification, biometric authentication, used to authenticate people by comparing their face against a trusted image, and above all, ensuring that their face is real and live. And liveness protection is the single biggest problem in the biometric authentication space. And we've recently had experience in which a massive SMS OTP fraud led one of our customers, the Singapore government, effectively to deprecate SMS OTP in favor of biometric authentication instead.
Thank you. I mean, so that really is showing the other side. Oh, looks like I need to use this microphone. This is showing this from the other side of the coin. It's an entirely different perspective, but I think it is so great to see that combination and how the market is evolving. And Sri, maybe you could talk about, now I should mention, Sri works for SOMOS, which is the parent company of XConnect, so we have a very close linkage here.
Thank you, Tim. So my name is Sri Ramachandran. I'm CTO of SOMOS. SOMOS is we call ourselves a trust player. So we come from a lot of numbering background. So we run we are the number administrator for the +1 country code. We issue toll-free numbers and actually manage them. We also manage certain compliance databases for TCPA compliance. So where we come at it from, by the way, Tim, the number was 31%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I knew I needed correcting.
So 31% of the universe of SMSs is for 2FA. And since the 2FA message is really to generate trust, right? So it has to originate from the right number and has to terminate to the right number. So what we do is, as part of our toll-free numbering administration duties, we actually make sure that the toll-free numbers have the right integrity so that they can be text-enabled. So only text-enabled toll-free numbers will actually send out these A2P messages. So we manage that registry, and that creates the integrity part. And also, just because we enable it, we also need to know what are the other numbers that are not enabled. So we have a database of numbers that should not be originating toll-free text messages, and it's called the Do Not Originate database. Very, very original name. And
that's what it says on the tin.
Yeah. And so the DNO for texting is actually a rule that's been kicked off by the FCC. So they do want to implement it to reduce the amount of artificial inflation of traffic and so on. And we supply that to the aggregator so that they can implement it to kind of kill messages that actually originate from fraudulent numbers.
Very good. So you can see three very different perspectives on this. I mean, I want to come back to you, Luisa, in particular about that observation I made about this 31% of the traffic. Is it failing? Is it dropping? Is it actually reducing? Do you really see that from a statistics point of view?
So it's quite interesting because we do see that traffic is stable in certain markets. So those markets that have not really increased the rates to these amounts of 30 cents, 20 cents, it's quite stable right now because we have not seen that amount of AI traffic also in the markets. So what we're seeing is that those markets where the rate went up and the AI traffic in effect increased, well, yes, the traffic is substantially decreasing because brands are saying, I'm either going to stop this and switch completely to a new way to authenticate my customers, or at least I'm going to be controlling this quite high, so the AI traffic that aggregators were seeing before is not there anymore. So in general, we're still seeing that those markets where everything should be working as it is, it's stable. I don't think growing, but it's stable. And then the other ones, there's a huge drop, yes.
Now that's kind of what I was expecting, which is good. So I haven't got it completely wrong here. But I think that statement of it's about where things are right, because I think that setting the price points correctly is such a key issue for the MNOs in ensuring that this continues to be a revenue stream for them and they don't overstate that price point. But I think the concern also is just about a loss of trust in what is going on. And that comes at a global level from the brands. So but it is great to see that it can continue, because it is effectively a worthy mechanism. It can do its job. Andrew, I'd really like to hear you already gave one example of where there's been a very direct implication here, and I wonder if there's other comments you'd make about it.
Look, I've been in the mobile telecommunications business for about 35 years. And I do not underestimate the ability of telcos inadvertently to do the wrong thing for their own long-term interests. Pricing up SMS OTP is a really, really good way to make that market go away, because the value proposition associated with authentication does not support these high levels of cost, except where the risk is very high, and at that point, nobody uses SMS OTP anymore. The challenge, I would argue, you've got a roadrunner moment, that this business has actually gone over a cliff, it just hasn't started to collapse anymore. The real problem with OTP, I'm afraid, is the social engineering risk. People have now understood that SMS OTP is incredibly vulnerable to social engineering. The moment that you put a human being in the loop, you create a mechanism which is now being exploited more and more by fraudsters more and more readily to steal passwords, to steal OTPs and engage in account takeover and fraud. Clearly, the telcos continue to have a role, and you're going to move towards other telco-based mechanisms of assuring device ownership. Because OTP is ultimately just a way of assuring that the user has control over the device, and its great beauty is that it's got 100% coverage. In many operators, there are other ways of doing that, silent number checking. And there are a variety of different mechanisms for doing that, which don't run the risk of fraud and don't run the risk of social engineering, and potentially are much cheaper as well, because the mobile operators have a different pricing structure associated with it. So you've got a better mechanism, less dangerous, potentially cheaper, and with a higher trust. Under those circumstances, SMS OTP's half-life is now inevitably going to be very short. The other part of this, and then I'll shut up, SMS OTP is one half of two factors. Two factors means device ownership and something else. Traditionally, it's password. Something you know, a password, something you have, your phone tested by OTP. Both of those are incredibly vulnerable to social engineering. And social engineering is now a colossal threat, and it's also a scalable threat, particularly when it comes to voice spoofing, which means that you can talk to all sorts of people that sound exactly like they should sound. So you're going to see a shift. It's going to be 2FA, but it's going to move from something you've got and something you know to something you've got tested in a much more reliable, less vulnerable way, and something you are, which is biometrics, which is one reason why I'm here, I'm kind of here, because from my perspective, the future is about to flip. And it's not going to make device-based, carrier-based solutions go away, but those of you who are in the SMS business are going to have to migrate to new carrier APIs in order to hang on to your revenue.
So I don't know, Luisa, if you have... Well, actually, Sri,
I wanted to
you're going to say something
yeah.
then.
So I think, great points, Andrew. So I think we have to maybe step back a bit and explain why this is happening, right? So 2FA means you sign into a system or a server, you put in a password, and then it says it wants to validate you, just like you said, Andrew, which is what you have. And what you have is your phone, or you're trying to validate your phone. So you get an OTP message or one-time password message that has a number in it, and you put it in, and you get authenticated. The interesting thing here is that you can have bots that can log into these systems and just automatically generate those OTP messages, right? Every time somebody tries to log in, it's going to generate an OTP message. So, and this is one of the key reasons why there is artificial inflation of traffic, AIT. And this is the reason why there's a loss of trust in the whole SMS channel. It's like, hey, if a bot can go in and generate all those messages, and those messages cost money. So I'm going to say a polarizing name. Daria, I hope half the room doesn't vacate. But Elon Musk last year tweeted saying that he's spending $60 million a year on fake SMS messages. So basically, bots trying to log into Twitter, generating messages, and he knows those are fake because the actual person is already logged in somewhere. So he computed all that and said $60 million a year. So it's real money that is being spent by brands on this problem. So it's a real issue. That's what I wanted to mention.
No, I think, and this is exactly kind of the point that I wanted to get to, which is let's try to kind of almost summarize or identify the problems that there are with this SMS-based 2FA world. And I think we've got one very clear message around social engineering and its exposure, another around the problems of, well, not even AI-based, but just bot-based abuse, which is coming through and causing artificial traffic inflation. So I guess my last question, we've only got a few minutes left, but okay, what can we do about it? And I think that has got to be, I'll start with you, Luisa.
So yeah, to continue a little bit of this and connect to that, I think that one of the main issues here is that, of course, when this situation of the AIT traffic was brought last year, it has been happening for quite some time at a different level, but then, many people open up their eyes and say, okay, here's, a possibility to keep on increasing this and getting, some interesting money out of AIT, right? And then they go, and the main issue that is happening right now is that this is a huge revenue for MNOs and for operators, right? So we have certain companies that are going and basically promising operators huge amount of money, kind of something that it's too good to be true,
Crazy numbers.
And then they say, okay, this is nice, I want to get this revenue, but this traffic that doesn't exist. So these companies go, create, this traffic, and then MNOs say, okay, I'm getting my money, and that's what's creating this entire issue, right? So we have brands that don't want to pay such a high amount of, rate for a single message, and then we have operators that want to monetize as much as they can. They get promised something that it's out of context, for certain markets, and what are we creating here, right? So I believe that at the end what we need to do is, make conscious of if we keep on doing this, the industry is eventually going to die, and we are definitely going to be shifting towards new technologies. SMS will always be there because at the end, it's a way to validate easy, all cell phones can receive a message, but it's going to be, shifting for other type of technologies eventually, right? But the main point here is, we need to be conscious of what we're doing here and how we're going to manage these promises and these fake revenues in the market.
Absolutely. In the last few minutes, Shreya, do you have any comments about what we can do here?
Yeah, so I think there is definitely a substitution that is already beginning to happen, right? So instead of these OTP messages, there's a new thing called flash calls. So essentially, it's a call that doesn't need to be answered, but the ANI or the number that shows up is your passcode. Similarly, there are FIDO or SIM-based approaches that you can do. And the third one is kind of using mobile network APIs to do silent authentication. So that way, you're completely bypassing sending an SMS to a phone and doing that. And of course, there are other channels like RCS, WhatsApp, authenticators, and so on. So
there's lots of choice. Andrew,
well, I'd be a bit mischievous here, actually, because I remember this happening. At that time, this was before the days of guaranteed minimum volumes to operators. But what happened was that Tre Italia started to pay customers €1 for every SMS they received. So what happened? You got enormous bot farms set up to sign on and get SMS OTPs onto the Transport for London website, which then got sent to Tre Italia SIMs, and you got bot farms. This is 2005. So the fact that we're discussing it, that you're discussing in 2024, this same problem, says that there's a structural problem. As an aggregator in those days, what we did was we were looking for it, and when we spotted this traffic, we did something about it. So this is not my business, but I would say if the good guys in this market start creating contractual obligations towards their enterprises in which they take liability for artificially inflated traffic, and that then becomes a competitive asset, then it becomes the aggregator's problem to police this. and do traffic analysis and source analysis, and it starts to become a competitive advantage that you put this contractual term in. Now, I'm not in this business, so that's not a liability that I have, and I would certainly never accept liability for any kind of for things that are outside of my control. But if you want to clean up an industry, that's one of the best ways. In the biometrics industry, we actually suffer from a not dissimilar problem where it's much cheaper to lie than it is to do a good job. A lot of my competitors claim to do things that they can't do because it's cheaper to make the claim than actually to deliver it. In many industries, that's the same. There will be aggregators here who do a good job, and so you want to stick a wedge between the guys who do a good job and those who just claim to do a good job.
So I think my panel have done a great job of providing that final summary, but I'll try my best in just a couple of words because I really have run out of time here. But I think, we were hearing a piece here about being reasonable, making sure that the financial models are reasonable, and if they're reasonable, they become sustainable. Mm-hmm. And I think at the moment we're going through, that's not the case. We're seeing some unreasonable models, so we need to bring those back to sustainability. I think we've heard a lot about alternatives, which has been great. And then I think, Andrew has really put his finger on the point that there is an opportunity to use best practice, to really say, what is the right way of doing this? Let's make sure the contractual agreements and the obligations that are placed on the supply chain actually create, again, I'll use that phrase, a sustainable model. But there are still alternatives. So all of that owned up. Now, do we have time for questions? I'm being allowed questions. Great.
Hi, my name's Ira. Great panel. A couple of interesting points. Andrew mentioned that this has been going on since we first started seeing A2P. I remember those days as well. And the fact that it's been going on for 19 years, we need to think about that for a second, because this industry knows about the fraud that's going through its channels, and yet it really hasn't done anything to stop it. Frankly, smishing, AIT, which has been discussed there, is nothing created by the industry, but smishing is by fraudsters coming out of the industry. Why don't we put up the firewalls to block it way back when? So, question, I guess, to the panel, do you actually think that this industry wants to stop the problems or the fraud that's going on in this channel? And the second question of that would be, Andrew mentioned changing what 2FA means. Do you think that we're going to be going to 3FA or 4FA, which is actually in some financial applications require?
Ari, you've got two questions in there.
I would never forget, does the industry want it? The members of MEF want it because the members of MEF supported the MEF in putting together the registry database, which has done an enormous amount to kill off smishing in the United Kingdom and in Ireland and in Spain and in various other countries. So. And the good guys in the industry certainly want to put it.
We're also working in the last year the Trust and Messaging Working Group, which is again to create that ecosystem that you were talking about to make sure that we can cover all areas. So go ahead.
Please.
No, I do think that we want it, and we've seen fraud and these type of things for a long time. The issue right now is that we used to see this fraud with rates that were about 1 cent, 2 cents. Right now it's 30 cents. So the cost for brands is extremely high. Right? So now brands are saying, okay, this is not going to happen anymore, and I'm going to move out of this. So we definitely want to control this because we want to make sure that we keep this money in this side of the the whole chain. Right? Operators want to keep this business growing and alive. So if we want to keep it alive, yes, we need to control it, and we need to make sure that this situation stops.
Should we go for another question?
Can I just answer one other point?
No, we can't.
There's no point having 3 factors if you've got 3 crap factors. 2 good factors is much better than 3 rubbish factors, because 3 rubbish factors don't improve your security, but they wreck your conversion rate, and then nobody's going to go for that. So it's much better to move towards 2 strong factors that really resist the threats, rather than just engage in theatre. And I'm sorry, but SMS OTP is becoming security theatre nowadays.
Superb. Well, thank you so much to my panel. Thank you for the audience for both your attention and Ira's questions. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.